Hello everybody, Keith here again. Not too very long, not as long as I thought it might be. But partly because of Roger's comments on the last one, that there were fewer orchid videos getting posted at the moment, and he thought that pretty much anything was better than nothing. And this is one that I didn't plan on doing until I went up going around doing some maintenance and watering and what have you today, finishing off. We're away next week, so I don't want to I was trying to get things in a state where they could be left for a few days, and I picked this one up and it wobbled like that, and I thought, well, that's obviously not good, the roots aren't very clever. And this is one I've had for a long time. This is Phalaenopsis Pink Twilight. It was the first named Phalaenopsis I had. I got it from Lawrence Hobbs at the RHS Tatton Park Flower Show, oh blimey, something like 2017 or 2018. You've seen it an awful lot because it puts out a ridiculously long flower stem, and as you can see there, it's away again, and as usual it grows up for a bit and then heads for the sunshine. And once it's done like that, that stem sets solid almost straight away. If you're not staking it daily, that's what you end up with. So I want to find out what's in the pot. Have I overpotted it, which is entirely possible. I don't know when it was last repotted. I haven't put a thing in. It must be several years, so it's probably due, and the bark is really pretty manky. Is that a Britishism? Related to the French word manqué, I think. Spoiled or ruined, and I suspect, again, in trying to keep the roots that it had in plenty of room, I've overpotted it, and lo and behold, there's a whole load of dead roots down in the bottom of the pot. I'm not surprised. As I say, I think this has been in here for a long time. There is a lot of stuff. The stem is all the way down there, so this is the living bit, and the stem starts down there. It's flowered way back, so I've got some live roots starting about here, from about there, so I'm going to cut off there for a start, and we'll lose this bit altogether. It's got a little bit of green on it, not very much, so I think if I dress that with some ground cinnamon, which of course is everybody's go-to antiseptic and what have you. I don't know where that one went, never mind, oh, it's down here. So the next thing I think is going to be to soak these up to get rid of all the old bark, and I've said this many times before, if you soak the roots before you start trying to detach these, you've got to remember that the orchids that live on trees, the epiphytic orchids. They are not growing into the tree, they're not parasitic, the roots have to hang on to the bark. So, as I've said many times before, I am a research mechanical mining engineer. I'm no way in this world am I any kind of biologist or plant specialist or anything like that. But it's fairly obvious that they've got to hang on in some fashion. So let's call it some kind of natural adhesive that holds the plant in place, something secreted by its roots. That's what I'm going to guess. And by doing this, I'm going to turn off and come back in a few minutes, give it time to work, and then it'll give it a chance. I'll sort out which roots are nice and firm. I'll be able to see which ones have turned green. Like most of my phals, I've had a horrendous 2 or 3 years now trying to get rid of mealybugs. They absolutely went through most of my collection like the proverbial dose of salt, and I am having the greatest difficulty shifting them. It's slowed down a bit now, the temperatures have dropped, but it is something. They seem to be a bit like mice. If you see one, you've probably got 20 somewhere else doing their best to breed and live the high life on your plants. Right, so whereas previously they were stuck really tight, I've now got the chance to ease these pieces of old bark away without causing significant damage. They'll come away quite easily now. It seems very strange that obviously when they're in the wild, on trees in the forests or whatever, that the rain can't do the same to them there that soaking them does in the home, because otherwise it'll fall off. And evolution doesn't really work like that. If there were some that fell off, they're the ones that, you know, that wouldn't last long enough to set seed and produce the next generation. So yeah, we've got there's quite a lot of good roots. There's a few bits of not very clever root, which is hardly a surprise given how long it's been, I suspect, since it's been looked at. I haven't got a date on it, so yeah, you see there's quite a lot of new root growth on it, so I am quite pleasantly surprised. That doesn't look very clever. That'll get damaged putting it back, I think. I'll lose that one. But all of this lot now is looking quite good. Some old, that's another old flower stem. it flowers regularly, so there will be stems galore, I suspect. If I knew where I was looking, what's happening here? I seem to have a tangle of roots. They've sort of grown over and around each other. I thought it was one long root. There's actually two quite long roots there. And the problem is always that you try, on the one hand, I know some people will just go whack and just take all this lot off. And I'm not keen on that. If the roots are working, the roots are working, but quite clearly that was too big a pot. It's not done a great job, and it's been in there too long. I mean, I can't say that often enough. So that I think is about ready to put that back in there to have a soak. I tend not to feed them when they've been repotted, so I don't know. It's just my gut feeling that if they need hydration, that's one thing. Am I being anthropomorphic? Possibly. You know, do they really need to be fed when you've done quite a lot of messing about? So, what have I got? It's a bit smaller, but not going too small. Oh, drat. I think that's going to be too small. I think that's going to be too much of a drop. This one. That's about the same size, I think. Yep, that's the same size. This is going to be fun then. Because the next one up is quite deep again. It's smaller than that, so it's going to be between that one, which I think is going to be too small, or this one. I'd prefer it to be that one, but I think that's going to end up too small, unless I start hacking roots about. And as I've said just now, I don't like doing that. I mean, yes, if I can get the roots to go into that and look, you know, and go in reasonably well. This turning, as you try and get them down into the pot, is something I first saw on a Roger's Orchids video, and he was saying that if you do this with it, you can persuade them to go around, and you can get a plant into a pot that at first sight you would think is much too small for it. And if I can get that into that pot, yes, there are also roots in there, but I kind of oscillate between overpotting and underpotting. And there's things for both, but at the end of the day, orchids don't like, well, very, very, very few, shall we say, orchids like wet feet. There are some, but things like phals, which are very much tropical epiphytic plants, you're talking about something that's going to get rained on, like a Vanda. They're the same group of orchids, monopodial. They grow where they're going to get a lot of rain every day. So they get storms, and then it dries up for the rest of the day. So there'll be a lot of rain, or there'll be mist coming in, or something like that. that gives everything a good soak, but then it stops and it all dries off. And then following day it starts again. So these things quite categorically do not want wet feet. But that is now, in gods, you can see how that must be between a third and a quarter of the capacity of the old pot. I haven't taken that much root off, so I hope that that is going to get going again and we'll be able to do something. Now, it's still a bit wobbly, as they very often are. I'm not going to try and do too much with it. Staking wise, I think that as these roots settle and go again, we'll be alright. So, that is a very quick repot of one of the largest fowls I've got. I mean, that's my hand, and I'm a big lad. This is must be getting on for 18 inch, 45 centimetres, 450 mil. From there to there. This is a big orchid. When it's doing well, it's a big lump, which is obviously great. It's reasonably happy, but when you've had something for a while, I mean, you don't ever want to dismiss plants and say, oh well, never mind, that's another one gone. But what I mean is, I've had this such a long time now, and it's done so well for me over such a long time. I don't really want to just neglect it and lose it. I mean, I've got to say, and I keep blaming illness, that me being ill last year, it's caused a lot of problems for a lot of orchids, and it's led me to a conclusion which I'll share with you. It's something I said in a talk that I gave to the East Midlands Orchid Society earlier this year. We all know that orchids do everything slowly. They just don't change massively overnight. They don't grow rapidly. The way they tend to be, the niches they grow in, they're nutrient poor, and as a result they've come so that they store nutrients in leaves or pseudobulbs or canes and what have you, and they use that when they come to the lean times. So nothing happens quickly. They're not evolved to do that. However, doing things slowly means that when something goes wrong, as human beings, we tend to think, oh, it's possibly happening on a human scale. And you think, oh, what did I do in the last few weeks that might have caused this? You might have done nothing in the last few weeks. You might have done nothing in the last few months. You could be looking at the result of something you did 6 months ago or more. I mean, I was ill from February 23. Well, the middle of February 23 was when things started to go downhill. I was in hospital for most of March. And when I came out, I was still struggling to walk. So really, from the middle of February right the way through until, say, the middle of May, end of May, was when I sort of got back to something like normality. and I could go out and I could do. Now, even then, it turns out the medication that I was on was affecting me mentally, and a lot of things I just couldn't be bothered to do. So these did not get the greatest of care, and as a result, from about November last year, in other words 12 months ago, right the way through to the middle of this year, I've lost more orchids than I have done in the previous 4 or 5 years since I started keeping orchids around 2016-17. I've never lost orchids in the way I lost orchids this time. And it's not that I've bought peculiar orchids. I mean, yes, I've lost a few things like Restrepias, but those were always plants I was going to struggle to keep. But plants that had done well in the past didn't. Now, a lot of them are coming back, but I've lost a lot of plants. And it is my feeling that what you can't do is just say, oh, well, you know, I must have been recent. I think you've got problems with orchids that if they go downhill, you've got to try and know what you did 6 months or more ago and review it that far back, if any of us keep records, and I don't. I'll happily admit that. I know some people do. I know Roger's got all sorts of spreadsheets, or he certainly has had in the past, where he keeps all kinds of data on. I've never done that. Can't be that organised. And it's taken me a very long time to bring some of them round again. And, you know, yes, some things are doing better. Whether they're going to survive or not, I don't know, but some are doing better. So as I say, just as a thing that's not really relevant to this repot, but just as general orchid keeping tips, when things go wrong, don't assume that it's something you've done recently. It may not be. Try and think what's changed. Were you on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks? Was it very hot? Was it very cold? And things like that. I mean, for example, last year, a plant that I'd bought didn't flower properly. There were flower buds on it when I bought it from Spiceotic Plants. It's a lovely plant, Phalaenopsis, and the flowers that were sufficiently developed flowered. The ones that were still small buds or developing buds all died. So that taught me another lesson, that there are, when we talk about temperature ranges, there's a temperature range for survival. So you can probably keep a plant in a certain temperature and everything's fine and it'll go through, but it won't flower. Even if it tries to flower, the flower buds will die on you. So sometimes when you say, well, it started to flower, but it didn't do any good, were the temperature conditions right for it? You know. But anyway, that was one. There was another plant. This is, what do they call it? Black Comet. It's a gorgeous hybrid. I think it's called Black Comet. And I bought that a couple of years ago. Just after I came out of hospital, we went to the Sheffield show about March or April, probably early to mid-April in 23, and I saw this plant on Lawrence Hobbs' stand. I bought it, and it grew and it did fine. It didn't flower, and somebody who bought a plant, an identical plant at the same time, his grew better and it flowered better than mine did earlier this year. So this time I left it in the conservatory, and the conservatory gets cold overnight, and it's nominally within the temperature range that plant will stand. It survived, it put up another new growth, but this year I've been a bit more cute with it, and it grew more strongly because it was getting more attention, I think. But when I noticed it was trying to pull a little, what looked a bit like a sheath out, I've moved it. It's gone upstairs, and it now sits on a bedroom windowsill, and it's doing very nicely. And in the same way, that Phalaenopsis that didn't do any good last year, year before last when I bought it, it's now coming into flower. It's on the kitchen windowsill now, and it's doing very nicely, thank you very much. So, you know, things that, small things like that you've got to think about and notice, and it's not always obvious. Perhaps it's my research engineer mind starting to add things together. It's what I tend to do, but you know, that's just one of those things. Anyway, I better stop waffling. My good lady will be coming home very shortly from her knitting group. We've got a little knit and natter group she goes to on a Wednesday morning. Today is the 4th of December, and anyway, I won't be posting orchid videos in the near future, I don't think, but if you're interested, you will be able to see a series of cruising videos in the next week or so as we go into Malaga, Gibraltar, Casablanca and Tenerife, and then we fly back from Gran Canaria. So that should be interesting. Well, it'll be interesting for me anyway, and a bit of winter sunshine, I hope. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed that and found it a little bit of interest there. I look forward to seeing you whenever I get around to posting the next one. Bye for now.